What's up, YouTube family and sports fans? It's your boy Chris with Drop Balls Podcast, back again with another YouTube video. And today is going to be a little controversial. But before we get started with that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below for your boy. Ring that bell one time so that way when I drop a new video, you all get the notifications. And if you like listening to podcasts, tune in to Drop Balls Podcast. It is available on every major podcast platform: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Amazon Audible, all of the above. So be sure to tune in. I dropped the episode this past Tuesday. I will put the link down in the description. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to leave your boy that 5-star rating if you enjoy the show. But without further ado, let's get into this video. Now, my question of the day is, and I'm going to answer this question as well, but my question of the day, and I want you to leave your comments down in the comments section: is Tony Romo a better quarterback than Troy Aikman? Now, I know this is going to stir the pot a little bit because you got the old school Dallas fans, you got the new school Dallas fans, and some of them are on different sides. I'm not a Dallas Cowboys fan. I'm just an impartial witness. So my opinion and my belief is Tony Romo is a better quarterback than Troy Aikman. And here's why I believe that and why I think it's justified to say that Tony Romo was a better quarterback. Now, Tony Romo started 9 seasons for the Dallas Cowboys. There were some seasons here and there where, like, his last 2 seasons, he didn't really play that much. And then, like, I believe his first 2 or 3 seasons, he didn't play at all. But in Tony Romo's 9-year career with the Dallas Cowboys, he only had a top 10 rusher in yards twice. That was 2013, 2014, and those were DeMarco Murray's last years last year's with Dallas. And I believe DeMarco those are the first 2 years DeMarco had reached the 1,000-yard pinnacle in his career. And I believe those 2 years, or one of those 2 years, he led the league in rushing and in touchdowns or something like that. And now I know some people are going to look at the stats and be like, oh, well, what about Darren McFadden in 2015? Well, also, the way I combat that, Tony Romo only played 4 games that year. He only started 4 games, only appeared in 4 games that season. So that's not a 1,000-yard rusher for Tony Romo. That's not a top 10 rusher for Tony Romo. That's a top 10 rusher for whoever the quarterback was for the other 12 games of that season. Now, 9 of the 12 years that Troy Aikman played in the league, he had a running back. I forget his name. Maybe it'll come to me. The name, all-time leading rusher, in Emmitt Smith. And 9 of those 12 years, Emmitt Smith led the league, or not led the league, but he was a top 10 rusher 9 of Troy Aikman's 12 years. And not only that, but 4 of those 9 years, he led the league in rushing. 3 of those years, he led the league in touchdowns running the ball. That was a part of Troy Aikman's team. Not only that, so from 89 to 2000, because those were the 12 years that Aikman played for Dallas, he had a top 10 defense 7 of those 12 years. He had a top 10 defense, with the first one coming in 92. And I believe that was the first year they won the Super Bowl. And Emmett led the league that year with 1,713 rushing yards, 18 touchdowns, averaging 4.7 yards a carry. That was the year they went to the Super Bowl. Now, granted, Aikman balled out in the Super Bowl. I believe he had like 200 and something yards and 4 touchdowns. He did what he needed to do, but that defense didn't give up any points. I believe they only, in the Super Bowl, they only gave up, I want to say, anywhere between 13 to 17 points that year in the Super Bowl. Aikman went out there and balled out, though, 4 touchdowns. Now, 92, Aikman had the 5th-ranked defense in the league, well, in points allowed, and then the 1st in yards allowed. Once again, they won the Super Bowl that year. 93, the 2nd Super Bowl. They went back-to-back, and they won. 93, defense was ranked 2nd in points allowed. I got all the stats written up. I know y'all see my eyes going back and forth, but 93, they were 2nd in points allowed and 10th in yards allowed. Top 10 defense. 95, the 3rd and the last Super Bowl of that decade for the Dallas Cowboys. Defense was ranked 3rd in the league in points allowed, 9th in the league in yards allowed. Another top 10 defense, which led him or helped him reach that pinnacle and win a Super Bowl. Now, he had he had 7 years where he had a top 10 defense. So over half of his career, he was playing with a top 10 defense in the NFL. Guess how many Romo had in his 9 years as a full-time starter? One. That was in 2009, where they made it to the divisional round in the playoffs. They lost to the Minnesota Vikings, which had Brett Favre and Adrian Peterson playing out of their minds. That was also the year that Bounty Gate. They went to play New Orleans in the NFC Conference Championship, and New Orleans beat the shit out of the Minnesota Vikings. Everything came out later on about the whole bounty on Brett Favre's head and trying to hurt Brett Favre, all this and all that. We all know what came out of New Orleans after that, but that was that year. That year, Tony Romo's defense, 2009, they were second in points allowed and ninth in yards allowed. Like I said, they lost to Brett Favre in the playoffs. They decided to give up 34 points in the divisional round of the playoffs. Had they not, had defense actually showed up, perhaps Dallas would have been in the conference championship and potentially the Super Bowl. Who knows? That year, I believe Romo also threw. We're going to go to the stats. Sorry, the airplane is flying above me. But that year, Romo also completed 63% of his passes, threw for 4,400 yards, 26 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Had an amazing year. Amazing year. So I will say this. Tony Romo did have a all-time great receiver in Terrell Owens. Granted, it was towards the end of Terrell Owens' career. He had him for 3 years. In all 3 years, T.O. had over 1,000 yards receiving. So I will give you all that if, that's one of your arguments that you want to make. But when you look at the regular season, Romo was significantly better than Troy Aikman. Romo had a 65.3% completion percentage. He had 34,183 yards in his career, 248 touchdowns, 117 interceptions with a 97.1 quarterback rating. Now, Aikman completed 61.5% of his passes for 32,942 yards, 165 touchdowns, and 141 interceptions. Had a career 81.6 quarterback rating. Now, before you say Romo threw the ball more than Troy Aikman did and this, that, and the third, when we look at the averages and we average it out per year, let's take into account all of Aikman's years. Let's take into account all of Tony Romo's years. Now, I didn't include the years where he had zeros, where he didn't play. I didn't include those years. But we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years. So 11 years, he played 1 year less than Troy Aikman. Troy Aikman threw the ball on average 393 times a season. On average, Tony Romo threw it 394 times a season. So while throwing one more pass than Troy Aikman a year, Tony Romo has less interceptions, higher completion percentage, more touchdowns, 1,241 more yards in one less year. Now, I will say this. When it came to the playoffs, Troy Aikman's numbers are significantly, or not significantly better, but his numbers are better. Troy Aikman made more playoff appearances than Tony Romo did. Once again, I attribute that to having a top 10 defense 7 of your 12 years, where Tony Romo only had 1. Anyway, but while Tony Romo's yards per attempt, completion percentage, and touchdown percentage went down, Troy Aikman's went up, as well as his interception percentage, because Troy Aikman threw a lot of interceptions. I mean, we're just going to call it what it is. He turned over the ball. Now, he had 23 touchdowns over the playoffs, 17 interceptions. Tony Romo, I believe, had, 8 touchdowns in the playoffs. Yeah, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in the playoffs. Tony Romo was better in that aspect, protecting the ball. Now, in 2 of his 3 Super Bowls, the last 2, not the first one, like I said, the first Super Bowl, Troy Aikman went out there and he balled out. He had 4 touchdowns, about like 200 and something yards. He balled out. But Aikman didn't really do much in the last two Super Bowls. Over the last two Super Bowls, he amassed 416 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Where Romo was more conservative in the playoffs, Aikman was more, I guess you would say, liberal in the playoffs, where he knew he had a top 10 defense that had his back. Romo didn't have that luxury. So he knew he couldn't make the mistakes that he could make during the regular season, but he couldn't make those mistakes in the playoffs. Now, granted, he does have his faults in the playoffs. We remember I believe it was where he was holding the ball for the field goal and fumbled it or whatever against the Seattle Seahawks. I believe that was in the playoffs, but we all remember that. But we know Tony Romo couldn't really make the mistakes. Aikman had a defense to rely on, so he was more of a loose cannon. And not only that, but when you're on your Super Bowl runs those 3 years, there's only 3 years, that's 9 games to get to to play until you play the Super Bowl. Like, well, not until you play the Super Bowl, but it's 9 games in total. Those 3 years. So in those 3 years, that defense only allowed 3 games where the opposing offense scored over 20 points in the playoffs. Everything else was under 20 points. So 6 games they played, or 9 games they played, 6, the defense held the opposing offense under 20 points. You're going to win games like that. When your defense is holding teams under 20 points a game, you're going to win those games. Now, if we look at it as a whole, he played 16 playoff games. 8 games the opposing team scored over 20 points. 8 games the opposing team scored under 20 points. But now, when we also look at that, out of those 8 games where the opponent scored over 20 points, only 3 of those games they won. And that was during those Super Bowl runs. All the other time, when the opposing offenses scored over 20, Dallas and Troy Aikman lost those games. Romo, on the other hand, had 8 playoff appearances. 1 game did the opposing offense score under 20 points. Every other game, it was 20 plus. It's hard to win when you're pretty much playing with a crutch. Your defense was the crutch. We saw Dallas defense since Romo really hasn't been good. I mean, well, since Aikman, it really hasn't been that good. Dallas defense has been kind of bottom barrel since Aikman. Now, there are a couple years where I believe Dak had a top 10 defense. But, I mean, there really hasn't been a lot of instances where Dallas's defense has been ranked above, below the 10 or top 10 in the league. So, I mean, I don't really know what to say. But, like, the only year that they had a top 10 defense, like I said, 2009, they let up 34 points in the playoffs to the Minnesota Vikings. And that resulted in the L. Now, we can go back and look at some individual accolades. While we know Troy Aikman is in the Hall of Fame, I chucked that up to those 3 Super Bowls. I said this before. I didn't think that I think Brandon Marshall was a better receiver than Michael Irvin. But because Michael Irvin has 3 Super Bowls, he's in the Hall of Fame. Brandon Marshall's probably going to have a harder time getting in the Hall of Fame than Michael Irvin did. But Troy Aikman has 6 Pro Bowl appearances, 3 times Super Bowl. He's in the Hall of Fame, or 3-time Super Bowl champ. He's in the Hall of Fame. When we look at Tony Romo, he only has 4 Pro Bowl appearances. And I believe he was, he had 2 stolen away from him. One was Cam Newton's rookie year, which was 2011. And that's when Romo, like I said, Romo has balled out. He's put up stats. He's put up numbers. 2011, Romo was top 10 in passing. He had 4,184 yards, 31 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Cam Newton was top 10 as well, but he was a rookie. He completed 60% of his passes, 4,051 yards, 21 touchdowns, had a ton of interceptions, 17 interceptions, but he also had 14 touchdowns with his legs. He got into the Pro Bowl. Romo didn't. Then we go, and you may say, oh, well, he was 8-8 that year. Well, Cam Newton was 6-10 that year. So that's not an excuse. It's not. Then we go to 2012. Romo was top 3 in passing. completing 65% of his passes, 4,903 yards, 28 touchdowns, 19 interceptions. Again, Dallas was 8-8. And guess who made it in over him? Aaron Rodgers. They were 11-5. Aaron had 4,900 yards, 39 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Understandably so. But also, Drew Brees made it in that year where his team was 7-9. He completed 63% of his passes, 5,177 yards, 42 touchdowns, 19 interceptions. And Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers made it in over Tony Romo. Also, Matt Ryan made it in that year too, where Falcons were 13-3. But yeah, so I think Romo would have just as many Pro Bowl appearances had it not been for those 2 years. But Troy Aikman never led the league in passing. I mean, when you look at his passing yards, he had first year 1,700, second year 25, third year 27, fourth year 34, fifth year 3,100, 2,600, 3,300, 3,100, 3,200, 2,300, 2,900, and then 1,600 his last year of his career. Tony Romo, on the other hand, first year starting 29, second year 4,200, 3,400, 4,400, 1,600. That's the year he played 6 games. 4,100, 4,900, 3,800, 3,700, 884, and then his last year with Dallas, 29 yards. All-time Dallas Cowboys passing leader with 34,000 yards, 248 touchdowns, 117 interceptions, averaged 394 pass attempts a year. To me, Tony Romo is the better quarterback. I think that Troy Aikman had a better team, better defense. It allowed him to go further in the playoffs, allowed him to win these Super Bowls. I think you replace Aikman with Tony Romo, that team is significantly better, and they're probably blowing teams out, like straight up blowing teams out. I don't think Troy Aikman was the caliber of quarterback that Tony Romo was. And also, significantly better offensive line for Troy Aikman. Not saying that Tony Romo didn't have a good offensive line, but I just think Aikman's was significantly better. And I mean, I don't think Dallas's offensive line started getting better until about 2011. That's when they got Tyron Smith. When was Zach Martin drafted? I know this is getting kind of long. Zach Martin was drafted in 2014. So, I mean, I don't know. I think Tony Romo was the better quarterback. Not only that, Tony Romo came out of Eastern Illinois, where they've only had 26 players to play in the NFL. Troy Aikman went to University of Oklahoma and went to UCLA, where combined they have over 700 players to have played or play in the NFL. To me, significantly better quarterback. And I think Tony Romo would be more successful on those 90s teams than Troy Aikman was. They might win more Super Bowls, in my opinion, than Troy Aikman would be with the teams that Tony Romo had in the 2000s. But let me know what you all think. Cowboys fans, leave your comments down below. Let me know if you think Tony Romo was better or if Troy Aikman was better, and let me know why. But, follow your boy on Twitter, @DropBallsPod. I will put the link down in the description. Follow me. I follow back. I like to have conversations, like to engage. So, come talk to me on Twitter. Leave your comments below. Check out Drop Balls Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Amazon Audible. Go ahead and check it out. And until next time, y'all be easy. Peace.